Hey everyone! In this video, we're going to go into detail about how to design high-quality assessments for grades 3 through 5. We'll look at how to analyze assessments for potential barriers, and we're going to give some examples of assessments for you to think about. Now, in the intro video, Tracy gave us 3 big questions we can use to evaluate the quality of assessment. We want to ask ourselves, how is the assessment linked to learning? How does the assessment engage the learner? And what barriers might the students be experiencing? So let's keep those in mind as we look at some examples for this grade band.
Don't forget, we also have the playbook, which has additional resources.
Okay, so Bill and Allison, can you try to really set the stage for us? Help us understand what might be going through the minds of teachers as they're walking into the classroom this coming year.
You mean other than, oh my gosh, what the heck have I gotten myself into?
Yes, Bill. Other than that, could you try to help us understand the barriers and concerns that educators might be walking in with? Maybe put yourself in the teacher's mind and try to explain how you're feeling.
Sure, I can do that. As a 3rd grade teacher, I'm worried that as we focus much more on reading comprehension in 3rd grade, if students haven't been reading regularly, they may not be as strong with their decoding skills. I'm also worried about math because I don't think students will have held on to their math skills unless parents worked with them a lot. Also, if students are coming in behind, I don't know how much time I can spend helping them prepare for standardized testing.
Okay, got that. So Allison, what do you think?
So for the record, I'm going to imagine I'm a 5th grade teacher. I like teaching 5th grade because at this point, kids have been doing school for a while and they get how it works. I worry that their 4th grade experiences were cut short, so they didn't get to do some of the important end-of-year projects. There's also going to be a lot of social processing that may make it harder for us to get back into our school routines.
Wow. Now, these videos really can't handle all of those concerns, but we can focus on helping teachers get a clear understanding of where a student is at in their learning and give some assessment techniques we can put into practice immediately. I guess before we dig into what my grandparents used to call the nitty-gritty of this video, I just want to say this. Teachers, you got this. Recent events have substantially impacted everyone's feelings. We're all experiencing a whole host of emotions, but it's okay. This year, maybe more than ever, we need to just have each other's backs. When you see a fellow staff member or a student doing something that's hard for them, whether it has to do with COVID-19 or not, I challenge you to just let them know you noticed. Be proud. Be proud of your students, be proud of your profession, and be proud of yourself. So team, given these overarching questions, what are your top 3 suggestions to help 3rd through 5th grade teachers assess their students this year?
Okay, so for grades 3 to 5, we're looking to conduct assessments that isolate school-related skills from content, create assessments that leverage video, and embed reflection pieces into assessments.
I think this first one, conduct assessments that isolate school-related skills versus content, is really critical, especially in a world where students have been out of school for 5 months. Maybe some of them will have forgotten or lost the habits and skills required for school, like sitting still or raising their hand.
Right, and those are separate from the skills or knowledge they may need to gain back related to academics.
100%. And the second one, about using video. Video is an incredible tool for educators to use because it provides a way for students to see themselves learning, which is critical at this age. We really want students at this age to view themselves as learners and to solidify the love of learning and creating, to develop a growth mindset.
And video or recording yourself is a great tool for doing this because it can help students reflect on their own learning and can be used to show the growth over time.
Okay, great insights. The last point seems to really go along with what you were saying, Allison.
Yes, embed reflection time into assessments is really just a way to say, help learners develop their own sense of how they learn so they can start to advocate for their needs and build their own capacity and skills for success. One way to do this is to include places for reflection in assessments. Offer sentence starters students can use to give themselves advice, like maybe how to study or how to remember the steps when solving a problem.
So now let's talk about some useful formative assessments, tips, or suggestions that each of you might have. But specifically, let's think about how to help us gather information about students in 3rd through 5th grade.
First, I want to remind teachers to carefully review their assessments, especially this year. Review your materials for confusing questions, for built-in biases that may make assumptions about background experience, or that don't allow students to see themselves represented in the examples. This may trip up students more than it may have in the past.
And I would add that educators should try their assessment strategies more than once and at different times of day. A lot of kids are going to return to school with heightened anxiety.
Right, and teachers can have flexible resources reliably available in the environment so that students can get help when they need it.
Okay, so assessing students multiple times and in different ways will help us gather better information.
And this is maybe a good time to talk about mastery-oriented feedback again. We introduced the topic before in our first video. In giving feedback, educators can encourage students to keep going with whatever skill they're working on, but also draw their attention to specific areas for growth. Instead of, for example, sending a student off to practice reading, where this practice might just end up repeating the same mistakes again and again, I would focus on sharing strategies that will help them build their skill, perhaps strategies for decoding or comprehension.
I'd also really encourage teachers to try to engage parents as early as possible. Many parents are going to be feeling heightened anxiety too, which means reassuring them and keeping them in the loop will be critical.
I also wanted to mention an idea we discussed in the intro video, which is the potential for sending a letter home and using that letter to start gathering information from parents about their children as learners. We put some ideas for the letter home for each grade band in the playbook, so be sure to check that out. Okay guys, so what are some examples of assessments that you've seen in the classroom?
Well, there's an example I saw in a 4th grade classroom that I thought was remarkable. The teacher had introduced the concept of growth mindset to her class. She then used the moment right before students got a math test back, normally a time when students might be especially vulnerable to a fixed mindset, to have them develop a list of types of mistakes in math. Maybe they read the question wrong, maybe they made a careless mistake, or they didn't understand the concept. They then got their math assessment back, and they scored it themselves. And next to each problem, they identified what kind of mistake they made. They also wrote a short note with advice to themselves on how to avoid making that mistake again. She really supported them to understand that they may not know something yet, but with the right kind of work, they can.
Another math assessment I've seen work really well is having students create short videos or recordings of themselves solving math problems. Students essentially narrate what they're seeing themselves do as they work. It's a really useful technique to use on many levels. I mean, it helps teachers identify where students are struggling, and if teachers did this at the beginning of the year, it would help them understand which math concepts students remember and feel confident explaining. And if teachers keep using this strategy, they could show students their growth from the beginning of the year. Some teachers might not think their classes can do this, but I'm telling you, this very energetic 4th grade class made a library series of student-based math videos that were really useful, and students were so proud of what they knew.
The other thing I was thinking about, Allison, is these videos or recordings could become useful tools to share with parents, and they could be really interesting to use with students in a remote learning environment.
Wait, 3rd grade is also the first time many students are exposed to large standardized tests. Any thoughts on how educators could be assessing for readiness around test taking?
Educators could start by creating practice tests that don't even focus on academic concepts, but instead are designed to help students get to learn more about how to take tests. And I also want to remind educators that a lot of statewide assessments have accessibility or universal tools built right into them. Teachers should familiarize themselves with those tools and help students understand how to use them.
And I'd really encourage educators not to frame the test as reflective of intelligence, but really to make sure they're telling students these are a snapshot of learning at that moment. We want to be really careful of accidentally reinforcing a fixed mindset. Instead, we want to reinforce a growth mindset by reminding students that their scores on these tests are really just used to help teachers support their learning in the future.
Another key concept for educators to keep in mind as they think about designing assessments is relevance. If you want to assess where students are in math or science, you can incorporate real-world examples. Could science understanding of germs be assessed through hand washing? Or could math assessments be linked to research or data around graphs and ratios of COVID-19 outbreak?
I agree, relevance is key for engagement. I would just caution us as educators to make sure we aren't increasing anxiety or perpetuating confusion.
One thing I think could really work for designing an early assessment would be to create open writing prompts, perhaps even related to COVID. Students could share about how they kept connected or struggled to connect with their friends with social distancing. That's a very real experience. A teacher could open up writing prompts and gain insights on social emotional well-being, and also it can give the teacher a nice writing sample from the student.
And I would encourage teachers to make sure they offer students multiple ways to demonstrate their writing skills, especially at the beginning of the year. By that I mean, do they have to write physically with like a pen or a pencil? Could they type? Could they record themselves or use text-to-speech? Especially early on, some of that anxiety about coming back to school could really be reduced by offering options.
I totally agree. I worked really closely with a third grade teacher who was helping a student who was struggling with writing. The student wasn't struggling with generating ideas, but the physical process of writing was so hard that his cognitive energy was spent on that piece and not on showing clear demonstration of skills in writing. Together, the teacher and I helped him use a voice recorder to record the first draft of his thoughts. Then together, we went back and discussed ways to add more detail and construct sentences and paragraphs. We probably had to do that 5 times, but by the end, he had a really well-crafted paragraph, which were results that he wouldn't have achieved if he had been required to start the writing by hand.
Okay, so in this video, we've given you lots of tips to think about. We really want to stop now and just encourage you to choose one and really try it out in your classroom.
Great point, Bill. I'd encourage teachers to think about focusing on formative assessments, especially for the first 3 to 4 months of the school year.
Yes, and don't be afraid to carefully and deliberately evaluate the quality of the assessments you use. In fact, if you want some ideas for doing that, you can check out our Designing and Evaluating Assessments video.
I really think we should all commit to fully embracing that this next school year is the year of growth mindset. No one knows what it will be like. It's going to look different for everyone, and it's going to be constantly changing and adjusting. The thing that can keep us on track is a growth mindset, a fundamental belief that embraces the power of learning, the idea that education is critical, and as educators, we can support this for our learners.
If you have questions or you want more examples of assessments, check out the playbook we created for this series. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.